Hello, my name is Morgan. Welcome back to my channel. This is another video about my zettelkasten, which is housed in Obsidian, and specifically about one function in Obsidian called aliases. An alias, spelled A-L-I-A-S in Obsidian, is essentially a nickname for an individual note. Say you have a note in your zettelkasten that is about one concept, but that concept could be worded in a number of different ways. That's when you might want to give that note an alias, because maybe you're not going to remember the specific wording that you gave that concept when you're searching for it during your note-taking, and you don't want to interrupt the flow of note-taking by going and trying to figure out what you called this idea. What you can do instead is give that note a nickname or two, and that way whenever and however you're searching for that note during your note-taking, you're going to come up with one of those ideas, and maybe there's a better phrasing within the specific note that you're taking that you prefer to use. So I want to give you a couple examples of when you should use an alias and when you probably shouldn't make an alias. Maybe you just need an entirely new note. Let's hop into my Obsidian and I will show you how to make an alias and give you some examples. Here we are with no note open. To learn how to make an alias, let's create a new note. So I'm going to Control N to make a new note, and let's call this something very simple, like I love rain. I think we need rain here where I am, so that's what I'm thinking about. Now, when I want to express the idea that I love rain somewhere else in my Obsidian, there are a number of different ways to articulate that. Like, I adore rain and I like rain, perhaps. Or maybe it's very similar to the idea that rain is my favorite precipitation. So, how to make an alias and give this note a nickname so that it appears in various ways when we're searching for it. I'm going to put 3 dashes, and you'll see those dashes changed shape as soon as I added the third one. Click Enter. And then I'm going to type alias, colon, and then what my alias is going to be. So I like rain, enter again, and then another 3 dashes, and then enter, and you can type your note as you would. Now that this note has an alias, I like rain, when I go to find this note and I'm thinking about how much I like rain, but the note's actually called I love rain, I'm going to start typing I like, and I love rain might not show up, but you know what will show up? I love rain's nickname. I like rain. And now it's going to look like I typed I like rain, but when I click on that note, it's going to direct me to the note I love rain instead. For example, let's click on a random note, like metaphor. This is just a word that I know I have ideas about, and so it's a space to collect some backlinks about metaphors. Let's say though, I'm writing about metaphors, and I say, I've written, rain is a great metaphor for sadness, which is ironic because actually, now I want to add in the note that I like rain. So I'm going to double square bracket, and because I just made the note, I love rain and I like rain are both showing up immediately, but that might not be the case later on down the road. And you'll notice that I love rain is just a note, but I like rain, which is right beneath it, also shows what the actual note is called, which is I love rain. And then off to the right, you can see a little arrow showing that I like rain is going to actually redirect you to I love rain. Another thing you can do here is add multiple aliases. So if I just put a comma after I like rain, I'm going to add a couple more versions of I love rain so that when I'm looking for this note, I can definitely find it. So I've added 2 more versions of this. I adore rain and rain is my preferred precipitation. Let's say I'm taking an academic note about the weather and I want to express why rain is my preferred precipitation, and I want that to maintain the academic language that I'm using within this more academic note. So maybe it's gonna sound a little silly if I just say, I love rain, you know? Instead, maybe I would like to say rain is my preferred precipitation, but I don't want to make a whole separate note directing to rain as my preferred precipitation because that note is essentially going to have the same content as my I love rain note. So why would I have 2 separate locations for those ideas when really it's all the same content? And now if I go to take this note, you'll see that not only is I love rain here, but so is I like rain, and I adore rain, and rain is my preferred precipitation, and each one of these is redirecting to I love rain. Wow, the word rain is really starting to feel weird in my head, and I don't like it, so let's move on. I want to give you another more complex example of how I've been using aliases lately. So here is my note on Cartesian dualism. And there's nothing in this note yet, it's just been a holding place where I can collect ideas about Cartesian dualism. So you see the backlinks on the side are more extensive. But another way that I sometimes express the idea of Cartesian dualism, which is a bit more descriptive, is mind-body dualism, because Descartes said the mind and body are separate and distinct. So Cartesian dualism for me is essentially the same thing as mind-body dualism. And every time I am saying mind-body dualism, I also mean Cartesian dualism, and vice versa. What I used to do when I started in Obsidian was make 2 separate notes for those words so that they would both pop up in searches, and then in each note I would just say, oh, see mind-body dualism or see Cartesian dualism. But I have realized that that is silly because they're essentially the same thing for me in my work, and they're both going to direct me here instead so that I'm not like jumping around, so that things are cleaner in my local graph view, which I like to use. But this is a more complex example because mind-body dualism was around before René Descartes was talking about mind-body dualism. So it's not identical to Cartesian dualism. If you are a philosopher and you are actually writing your dissertation about mind-body dualism, you probably don't want to attach it to the idea of Cartesian dualism because you're probably talking about the mind-body dualism that existed in Aristotle and Plato and was just expressed slightly differently than Descartes did. For me though, everything I'm talking about in my dissertation happened after Descartes, and so whenever I refer to mind-body dualism, I am referring to it in the way that Descartes kind of normalized. So here is an example from my own research that speaks to that exact thing, why you might not want to use an alias if you are particularly focused on a topic that to others these 2 terms might appear synonymous, but to you, they're actually quite different. And for me, an example of that is the word amateur. In my dissertation, I talk about hobbyists. And in general, hobbyist and amateur, unless you're maybe in the sports scene, are kind of similar, right? Sometimes I'll say amateur theater artists, sometimes I'll say hobbyist theater artists, and both of those things kind of mean the same thing. But in academic fields, for instance, in serious leisure studies, which I reference in this note here, amateur is distinguished from hobbyists because, as Elkington and Stebbins write, hobbyists lack a professional alter ego. So I don't want hobbyist to just redirect to amateur because hobbyist is a different specific concept. And I actually reference the hobbyist note inside of the amateur note because they are related concepts, but they are definitely separate. So if I click into hobbyists, again, we get a more specific definition of what a hobbyist is as separate from an amateur. And I do reference amateur in this note because, again, very, very similar concepts, and some of the notes, I'm sure, over on the backlinks are actually meaning amateur maybe, but as long as I'm linking between these very similar notes that have this special difference between them, then all will be well, and I don't want to use an alias. Another very simple example of this, I refer to my academic research note all of the time. Again, there's nothing in the note, it's just a place for me to collect backlinks, and I have extensive backlinks headed towards academic research, so anytime I want to, I can open up the local graph view and I can see everything that I've said about academic research, which is great because it's something I'm interested in. But what I haven't done here is add an alias to research. Even though academic research and research more generally might be very, very related to each other, I'm talking about something specific in these notes, which is how academics approach research and looking at research within an academic context, which is a very specific context to perform research inside of. And I don't have any notes that refer to something just called generically research. I don't know how useful that is going to be in my Obsidian, but I definitely don't want to just be referring every instance of the word research to my academic research note, because that would just clutter up my local graph with a bunch of things that aren't relevant to me when I want to think about research in the context of academia. And those are all the examples that I wanted to share with you right now. I hope you learned how to use aliases and when you might want to use aliases, when you might not want to use aliases, and these things can shift over time, of course. If you're already using aliases, let me know some of your favorite rephrasings of your notes in the comment section below. What do you like to nickname your notes? Do you have any silly ones? I would love to hear about them. And I will see you in another video again soon. Bye, everybody.